The whole story began as a response to the single story that the media was sharing about the Black community, where you basically just assign one narrative to a community and then that's all they are. Hi, my name is Rachel Egboro and I'm director, curator of The Whole Story, where 5 individuals share personal stories to expand Black narratives.
There's a lot being said about us, so I think it's important to have narratives that are strong and rich and counter-narrative to what's mainstream.
Being Black in America is being as authentic as I can be.
Stories inherently create empathy with the people that they're shared with. Tamir Rice happened in Cleveland in 2014, so that could have been me, really just a kid playing with a toy.
When people in the audience who don't look anything like the people who are sharing their stories, they can listen and connect with the experiences, the feelings, the emotions shared that's behind the stories.
My story was a journey throughout my life. In all of those different instances in my story, I was one of few Black people.
I feel like it's really important for African Americans to start telling their stories more so that we know who we are.
It's always important to just hear individual experiences because those individual experiences add to the whole story.
Welcome to The Whole Story Part 2!
Hi, good evening. My name is Nikki Dillion-Martin, and I am the Chief External Affairs Officer at Phoenix Art Museum, and I get the privilege of welcoming you to the latest edition of The Whole Story. Tonight's event is what we call a Pay What You Wish event, which we have a little link that just showed up. If you'd like to make a donation, it benefits The Whole Story and Phoenix Art Museum, but it is Pay What You Wish, so if you can't pay anything, you're here, and that's what matters most. I really wish I was not doing this from my empty guest bedroom and was instead at the museum with everybody, but unfortunately we can't. So I'm really grateful. I'm extra grateful this time for everybody who has shown up and to create a virtual community in this time of social distancing, and also showing up to be a community that amplifies Black voices and Black stories at this really important and extraordinary time in our history. This is the point where I normally would immediately turn things over to Rachel, but before I do, I'm going to say a couple things about her. So Rachel Egboro is The Whole Story's creator, director, and curator, and a fabulous storyteller herself and young professional. I think the world of her anyway, but now I get to extra think the world of her and to congratulate her on behalf of the museum for being named one of Phoenix Business Journal's 40 Under 40 for being a dynamic and innovative young professional. So extra love and huge congratulations to Rachel. That's all for me, but again, thank you for being here, and now I turn it over to Rachel.
Thank you so much, Nikki. So great to partner with you again digitally. Usually we would be exchanging a hug right now, a couple backpats in there, but alas, here we are. So thanks again for the wonderful partnership with the museum.
Thanks.
So between the pandemic, protests, politics, it's hard to stay connected. I know you all feel this way of just wanting to disconnect, zone out, and watch Netflix all weekend. That's certainly what I have felt like doing and have definitely done. But tonight I ask you to check in, to listen to our stories, which have been developed over the past few months. We had planned to do this show in April, but a pandemic happened, and really, the whole story was created in 2017 for times just like this. I've had the honor over these past 4-ish years to curate this space just for Black stories, and it has truly been a wonderful time and journey, and I'm so glad that we're able to share these stories digitally despite all that has happened. Some of you may not relate to the people who are telling their story. You might see someone that looks nothing like you, But I feel and I know that you will relate to the stories being shared. You will connect with these stories of resilience and perseverance. That's our theme tonight. And I hope that you will enjoy them, but most of all, that it will start conversations, that you'll think of the ways that you connect to these stories and the ways that you don't connect. Because at the end of the day, we're all human and we're all in this together. Super cheesy to say, we're all saying that, but it is actually true. So with that, let's bring up our storytellers. Chrystal, Rodney, Jason, join me on stage for this call and response that my uncle taught me from Nigeria. It goes a little like this. And for those of you at home, the instructions are at the bottom of the screen. So we'll just do one quick run through. I say story, story. You all say story. You only say story once. I say once upon a time. You all say time. Okay, great. You all at home, you guys got it. Storytellers, you got it. Let's do this one more time. Let's get all on the same page. Story, story. Oh, sorry. Story. I think I messed it up. No, I didn't. All right, let's do that one more time. Rewind. Okay. Story, story. Story. Once upon a time. Time. Great. What I love about that exercise, it gets us all on the same page. It gets us ready for a great story. So first up, we have Chrystal Stewart, who I'm so glad she's joining us again. She's actually been on the stage before at Whiteman Hall at Phoenix Art Museum. And she told this whole story, part 2, way back in 2017. So I'm so glad, Chrystal, that you're here with us, sharing your story, Raising Me. Take it away.
Okay, so when I was around the age of 8 or 9, I learned very quickly to clap back. You may not know what clap back is. That's bagging, that's roasting, playing the dirty dozen. And between my older siblings and a host of cousins, this was like a necessary skill that you had to have. You had to have it. And let me tell you, I was an easy target. I was skinny with a big old head and a big old butt. So, and this was one of the lines that they loved to use on me. They would say, Chrystal, you look like a toothpick with an orange on your head and a booty that goes, boom, Jamaica. Like that was their line all the time. And I didn't have time to actually come back with any sensitivity or crying or anything like that. I just had to say something back. So this is how you clap back quickly. So I come back with them and I say, you know what? I don't know why you even talking with your nappy head, looking like Aunt Jemima tail. And then they would come back right back at me. And they'd say, don't try to bag with them crusty feet looking like you've been kicking flour. And then I clap right back. Okay, all right. I see you. Looks like you've been eating flour because you got crusty lips. So this was like something that we constantly did all the time. Like, and it was never any love lost. Like all day long, this is what we did. Just clap back, clowning, roasting each other. And now that I'm a mother, I have 3 kids. 2 of them are pretty much adults. And I remember their friends were over the house and they're all in this room. And I'm hearing this like going back and forth. And like, I'm telling you, the stuff that I was hearing, like if I had pearls, I would have clutched them because I'm like, oh, what is going on? So this is some of the stuff I heard. I hear my son say, man, dude, you look like a burnt Jiminy Cricket. And then his friend would come back saying, man, be quiet. You look like a Tootsie Roll with a jacket on top. And then his other friends, you just mad because you look like a peeled back peanut. Like this was going back and forth. And then I heard them say something about Instagram. And so when I heard them say Instagram, I'm like, okay, let me check with my son. What are you talking about? So I asked him, I'm like, yo, what are you saying? What are you talking about? And so he starts showing me his scroll of his pictures. Y'all, in this particular scroll, there were roaches with his friend's face on it. There were Tootsie Rolls. There were peanuts with someone's face on it. Like, it did not stop. A burnt hot dog. I even saw a burnt hot dog with his friends. And yeah, I was so nervous. I was like, oh my gosh, I was not ready for this. And I figured, you know, okay, once their friends leave, I'm gonna have a conversation with my boys, because we didn't raise them like this. The boys gonna have some emotional like issues, like for real. And so their friends leave. I get with my sons and I'm like, hey man, like, yo, why do y'all go in on your friends like that? Like, they're gonna be crushed. Like, he's really gonna be like hurt. And they both start laughing. And I'm thinking to myself, like, why are they laughing? And they're like, Mom, dude, like, we do this all the time. Like, this is all love. Like, nobody's feelings is hurt. They come at me, we go at them. And at that moment, I remembered, to this day, and my siblings could tell you, to this day, we do this to one another. We still go in on each other. Don't ever have an off day, because we going in, no holds barred, like we're going in. Now, those are my two older sons. My younger daughter, she's 13. And when she was around the age of 4 and 5, she would say the most like ridiculous things. Like, she did not hold her tongue. This is what I loved about it. She had no fear. I remember we were at church and my sister was holding, she was holding my daughter because she was, small enough to do that. My daughter at this time, because she was maybe around 3 or 4, and she couldn't fully, say all of her words correctly. And so she looks at my sister and gets really close up on her, and she's like, Lelo. And so my sister kind of like looks and like, Lelo. And my daughter, she repeats it, Lelo. And she points at her teeth, Lelo. And so this is the kind of girl that I have. Another time, my daughter loved to dance. We love, don't judge me, we love all of the little dance movies, Step Up, all of these other stuff. And so she would dance around the house. And I remember I was up in my room and she's dancing, going through her little thing, spinning around. She jumps in the air and lands in a little split. And she kind of looks up and she grabs herself and she says, oh, my nuts. I'm like, baby, you don't have nuts. And so this is the kind of girl that I have. Like I said, she was just absolutely just full of life, free, bright, just no one could dim her light. But I noticed that when she entered into school, which was a predominantly white school, her light started to dim a little bit. And I'm like, okay, I wonder what this is about. And so we had our normal routine. I would go pick her up from school, and we would get in the car, and then I was waiting for the tea to spill. She would just unload, give me all the drama that was going on, give me the highlights and the lowlights of her day. This one particular day, I pull up, she jumps in the car, and she starts to tell me about her day. And she says, and this day particularly, she says, Mommy, I was going into classroom, and one of the boys said to her and another African-American, which, by the way, they were the only 2 in their class. And he says, if I turned off the lights, I bet you would disappear. And so I'm waiting to hear what she says, because I'm like, yo, ooh, this is going to be good, because my girl, she can bring it, okay? I'm like, okay, she can bring it. And so she's fired up as she's telling me all this stuff, and you would think, okay, like, you would think she would just like go for it, right? But this is what happened. So she tells me, she's like, Mom, like, well, I guess you would think that since you happen to be just a stupid, this is what happens with stupid and unintelligent boys who lack brain cells. Like, she's just going up, throwing all kind of things like that. I know that was one of the things she was like, you just lack brain cells. And so I'm like thinking, yeah, got him. And I'm like, baby, so, did you say that? And in a very like bashful way, she just kind of looks down and she's like, no. And I'm like, why didn't you say that? Like, I've given you guys permission. Like, if you're defending yourself, go for it. Like, I'm not gonna be mad if I get a call from a teacher or from a principal. Like, you're not gonna get in trouble because you're defending yourself. And she said she didn't want to get in trouble. And I remember when I started to go into the workplace, and I would encounter people who were also like Caucasian, Anglo, white. And I remember one day I went and grabbed some lunch, and I came back to the office to eat my lunch. And I went to the break room, and I'm getting out my food, and I sit down, you know, getting ready to go in on this food. And so as I'm doing this, a young lady comes up, and I have on these big hoops. I had braids on at the time because I was really younger. Had braids on at the time, and she says two things to me. She was like, "How do you get those braids on your hair? Do you like glue them individually to your head?" And I'm thinking to myself, "Whoo, if I could clap back." This is so I didn't say anything to that. And then she comments on my hoops. Y'all can tell I got big hoops, and I love big hoops. That's just, it reminds me of Angela Davis. And she's like, "Oh my gosh, your earrings are so big. I bet you I could put my fist through them." And so that time I'm like, okay, I won't clap back, but I'm definitely going to respond. And so I just looked at her, and I'm like, yeah, they are big. I love them. They're my door knockers, and, you know, just to kind of make light of things. But inside I was so irritated. And I remember, and so as I'm reflecting on my daughter, I can see why she hesitated, because this is what I constantly have to do, is I have to hesitate, because if I clap back, that's going to be too harsh. But if I come back, if I just make a response, then it may blow over. And we have this hesitation. Like, I had this hesitation because I encountered another gentleman like a couple of years later, and he was talking to me about a young lady on this documentary, and she was talking about the injustices that happened. And she was saying how she just, you know, and I quote, she was like, "This is bullshit. This is bullshit that we're going through this. This is bullshit that we are facing mass incarceration." She's just going down the list of all of these injustices that we as people of color experience. And his response, as he's telling me the story, and I'm, you know, thinking, where's this going to go? And he says to me, "Man, she just sounds like a bitter Black woman." I'm thinking, what? At that moment, I couldn't even say anything back, because I knew whether it was a comeback, whether it was a clap back, it was not going to be good. And so I can put myself in my daughter's shoes, and I could put myself in her place, because somewhere along the line, even though I grew up this way, I lost that voice a little bit, and hesitate. I constantly hesitate when I'm faced with comments that are just so absurd. And so my daughter, even though she's just this amazing young girl, she's very intelligent. If I could spend another 20 minutes talking about my baby, it wouldn't be enough, because she's just an amazing girl, very bright, very intelligent, strong, resilient, very caring, very loving. And so as I look at her, and I have this opportunity to walk her through some of these situations that she's faced with, I realize now I have the opportunity to raise me again.
Yay! Thank you so much, Chrystal. Raising a young Black girl in America is not easy. We were young Black women, so we know what it's like, and our only hope is in this new generation, and how we can instill in them that resiliency, that ability to bounce back and clap back. I know I didn't get it. My brother can school me for days, and I'm just like, I don't know what to say back. So maybe you can school me too. Thank you so much, Chrystal, for sharing your story. And with that, we're going to bring up our next storyteller, Jason Gillette. He is here with his story. It's really long. The first day of the rest of your life. Let's go, Jason. Thank you for being here, and take it away.
Thank you. When I was a senior in high school, I had aspirations of playing basketball. I thought I was pretty good. I even had my number picked out. It was number 55. There was only one small problem, me. I was actually only 5'4" when I graduated high school, and my opportunity or my dreams of playing basketball were as hard to see as I was. But I still had a decision to make. I still had to make a decision on where I was going to go and what I was going to do with my life. 2 years prior to that, my brother had been in the Marines, and there was this talk about, oh, you should do the same thing. And so when my brother came back from boot camp, though, he was like marching in public and saluting stuff. And I'm like, nah, I'm not, I can't do all that. That's a little bit too much. But there was an instance where he introduced himself to a group of people as a Marine, and the level of respect and honor that they showed him was impressive. It was amazing. So much so that later that year, in October, I actually joined the Marines myself. On the bus ride down to the Marine Corps depot station, you could hear a pin drop. I know for sure I was scared, but I would assume that everyone else on that bus driving down there was just as afraid as I was. Not a word was spoken. Matter of fact, I don't think anyone looked at each other. Everyone just looked straight ahead, like as if we had to. When we got there, one of the largest human beings I'd ever seen in my life jumps on the bus, so much so that the actual bus leans over to the right as he gets on. And he looks at us and he shakes his head and he's like, no, not this bunch. You won't become Marines. And he looks at us and he says, welcome to the first day of the rest of your life. Now get the fuck off this bus, right? And so he goes into this complete, absolute yelling frenzy. I don't think I've ever met anyone who got that angry at 9:30 at night in my life. He screamed at the top of his lungs the entire time. We scurried off that bus and stood on these yellow footprints as they asked us to do. And as we stood there, he screamed, you're nothing, you're not gonna make it. This is too much for you, and you know, and so forth. And he was loud. I mean, yeah, loud. He was scary, I'll be honest. I was a little intimidated. He was big, he was aggressive. Yeah, he kind of reminded me of my mom. You see, when I was a kid, my mom would wake us up early in the morning and open up all the blinds and turn on her music. She would turn on this, one of the songs she had was disco jazz. And yeah, if I hear disco jazz one more time, I don't know if I'll make it, to be quite honest with you. But at any rate, she would scream, get up, get up, get up. Clean, clean, clean. You know, that's how she sound, right? And I was like, this is ridiculous. And so when I'm standing there on these yellow footprints, it's oddly familiar. You see, boot camp in the Marines lasts 13 weeks. And by week 11, I was still standing. We had one more test in front of us. It was called the Crucible. It was a 54-mile hike over the course of 3 days. And I think you had 2.5 meals that last you that entire time. And as the drill instructor handed us our meals, he looked at me and he's like, yeah, this is the place where people like you don't make it. He's like, you look hungry already. He's like, this is hunger at its worst. He's like, have you ever been hungry? Like, nah, no. He looks at me and he's like, yeah, this is where most of the people like you fail. And I remember when I was a kid, my mom asking me, are you hungry? And I'm 4. And of course, yes, everything that is food I want. I'm 4 years old, feed me. And so my mom's like, okay, so my brother and I and her go to this house. And so she pulls the window open just a little bit. And back then, there were the windows that you kind of rolled, right? And they would open up. And so she would open it just enough for a 4-year-old to get in. And so I would slide into the window and then unlatch it and then unlock it all the way so we could get into the home. And so we get into the house. My mom goes to the kitchen only to find out that the food in the pantries was gone. It was all put into the refrigerator. But to the owners of the house, they chained the refrigerator shut and padlocked it. You see, it'd been there before. My mom was devastated. She didn't really know what else to do. And so she took my brother and I into the bathroom, and she sat there for a second. She stood up and she punched a hole in the wall. And I thought she was just upset. And so I looked in fear a little bit, but she actually grabbed the pieces of drywall that she'd broken off, and she snapped it in two, and she began to eat it. And then she hands the other piece to my brother and I and say, split that. This is dinner. And in that moment, I snapped to myself. My doctor says, are you ready? And I say, yes. And he looks at me with this smug look and he says, we'll see. As we begin to walk the 54 miles, we're getting tired. By mile 40, it is sizable how many people are really struggling. My friend asks me, he's like, hey, so why are you not tired? Like, we've been walking. He's like, why are you still going? He's like, are you exhausted? And I was like, no, actually, I'm okay. And the reason why is because as a child, when I was young, we didn't have transportation. And in most instances, we were homeless. And so we walked everywhere. Matter of fact, my mom taught us how to walk from bus stop to bus stop so we can understand how our route would go. So that way we never got lost, like checkpoints. And so we got to the point where we got to the mountain, the piece de resistance. It was about a half mile, almost straight up, it felt like. And at the end of 54 miles, we had to climb this intimidating loose dirt mountain. And I'm putting one foot in front of the other, trying to make sure that I can get there. I'm exhausted. My buddy grabs a hold of my pack because he's getting tired, and I grab his sleeve of his blouse, and we both kind of manage our way up this mountain. When I got to the top, I really wish I could explain how amazing it was. All of the hard work and everything that I had been through kind of got summed up in one moment. You see, when we got to the end of this crucible, you stood there on top of this mountain and you hear the Marine Corps hymn in the background. You're too tired to care, but you are so overwhelmed with gratitude when they handed you that Eagle Globe and Anchor in the palm of your hand. It made everything worth it. You see, maybe it's right. Maybe the first days were the beginning of the rest of my life. Thank you.
Yay, Jason. Yay. Thank you for sharing your story. Thank you so much.
Anytime.
Yay. Great. Well, this next storyteller I know very well. Her name is Rachel Igboro. It's me. And here I am with my story called The Slow Climb. Let me just put on my storyteller hat. Okay. It was Thursday, I was 9, and I was wearing the most uncomfortable clothes that I had in an attempt to look professional. Rather than joining my mom and my brother on our daily commute to school, I was carpooling with my dad to the office for take the daughter to work day. We jumped on the I-10 and I knew exactly where we were going because you could see the blue shining glass of the Bank One Tower in downtown Phoenix. On the ground floor, he and I parted ways, and I was led to an orientation room where we watched a video about the history of the bank, and then they released us to find our dads. We were all loaded with this bag of pens, notebooks, piggy banks. And the other girls looked uncomfortable, unaware, unsure of where to go next. No, they hadn't been there before, but I headed straight to the bank of elevators and pushed the button for 20. You see, on the weekends, my dad would coerce my brother and I to go hiking Camelback Mountain with the promise of breakfast afterwards. So my brother and I would trudge up and, we would invent ways that we could get to the top of the mountain faster. We would talk about, if I had the superpower, I would just snap my fingers and get to the top. I would fly, I would tunnel through the mountain, whatever we could do. But my dad seemed to have superpowers because he would laugh us. He would go up, down, and then he'd meet us and be with us for that last scramble as we got to the very top and then climb down with us. Sometimes after breakfast, we would stop by the office so that my dad could get some work done. And I'm not sure what was so important to get done on a Saturday afternoon, but as soon as we hit the 20th floor, my brother and I would just disappear into this sea of cubicles. We'd hunt for candy, we'd play for toys on people's desks, and study family pictures. So that first time that I was there to actually see the floor in action was that day on Take the Daughter to Work Day. The lights were on, bustling, people everywhere. And I must have looked confused because the receptionist took pity on me and led me to my dad's corner office. And then he and I spent the rest of the morning touring the building. And everyone that I met, from the security guard on the first floor to his secretary, all said how funny my dad was and how no meeting could begin without him breaking the ice with some sort of joke. So we're gathered in front of my dad's office and some coworkers are there, his secretary, and she looks at me and asks me, "Have you heard the one about the chicken and the pig?" I hadn't, and my dad needed little to no encouragement to launch into the joke. So the chicken and the pig decide to go for a hike. Pig was really excited about it, loves hiking, and he wanted a buddy, so he asked Chicken to go with him, and Chicken obliged. Halfway up, the chicken is struggling. Her wings are dragging on the ground. She is just drooping and looks like she's having a really hard time. Whereas the pig, he is bounding over rocks, leaping over boulders, and just enjoying his life. So he looks at the chicken, sees her struggling, and says, "Hey, chicken, how about after this hike, we go and get some breakfast?" Chicken brightens up. She immediately starts leaping over boulders, bounding over rocks. She's going for it. They get to the top of the mountain and they're chilling in the sun, and Chicken bolts up with this great idea. She says, "Hey, Piggy, why don't we have breakfast up here? We have everything we need. I'll push out a couple eggs and you give up some bacon." Pig looks at her and he says, "That's not a good deal for me. For you, it's a donation. For me, this breakfast would cost me my life." Everyone starts laughing. And I'm standing there smiling politely. And I'm looking up at all these adults laughing, my dad loudest of all. And I think to myself, is my dad actually funny? This is news to me because at home, he was like Captain Von Trapp. My brother and I went from school to church. Anything else was a distraction. And we never really pushed back against this strictness because we knew where it was coming from. The view from the 20th floor at the bank was a lot different than the view my dad first saw when he first started climbing as a 9-year-old orphan in Nigeria. Back then, all he had was his hard work and determination, and not even cute girls could distract him from getting the highest grades in his class. And he worked so hard, he got a scholarship full ride to study at ASU. He earned his undergrad, his MBA, got his job at the bank, married my mom, got a house, 2 kids, and a cat, the American dream. So for Father's Day that year, I copied all the elements that you see on a dollar bill and put it up on this big poster board. And in the middle, I put a picture of my dad. And underneath, I wrote, "Dear Dad, you may not be the president, but you're my dad, which is much better. Love, Rachel." And my dad really loved that gift because it hung up above his computer at his desk in our house from middle school, junior high, high school, college. Even when I came back from Mexico, it was still there. And like a lot of my peers, I moved back home because I needed to figure out what I was doing with my life. And it wasn't the home that I had left. The Great Recession had left its mark, and the dad that I had known my whole life disappeared with his job at the bank. That first day that I came downstairs, I was shocked by what I saw. There was my dad, hunched in front of his computer in a poorly lit room, the only light emanating from his computer on his face. And above him still hung that damn Father's Day gift. The colors were faded, the text was silly, and the script was childish. And the only thing that remained unchanged was my dad. In the picture, he was still looking calm, cool, and collected, leaning against his desk at the bank. That was my dad. Him. Not this deflated balloon that was trolling the internet looking for his next move. I wanted to take that picture down, this mocking portrait of what we once were. And I was going through my own crisis, a quarter-life crisis, if you will. I just couldn't settle for the same 9-to-5 job anymore. And I was so afraid of making the wrong move, messing up my future, wasting my time. So I just felt stuck. And I guess my dad and I were in the same boat because we spent our days looking on the internet for our next step, but never making a move. One morning I came downstairs and my dad said, "Rachel, this looks like you." And he shows me a job for a position to be a bilingual training specialist. If I had seen it, I would have scrolled right past it. I mean, specialist? Me? Come on, I was an English major. But my dad thought I would qualify for it. And as I looked at the description, I would be working with families, encouraging them to include reading, part of their daily routine, and just having fun, singing, dancing, reading, all the things. And I was like, wow, this really does sound like me. So my dad helped me with my resume, my cover letter. I applied and I got the job. And so now I was leaving for work and feeling guilty because I was leaving my dad behind. But it's not that he had trouble finding a job. He went from tax preparation, he went back to banking for a bit, customer service, caregiving, real estate. But around 3 months, he would get this itch and discard the job like a pair of ill-fitting pants. And my brother and I were flabbergasted by this. I mean, what happened to all of his speeches about hard work and determination? One day I sat down with him and I said, "Dad, what did you want to do before you worked at the bank? What were you passionate about?" He shrugged. He didn't know. So I said, "Well, what are you good at?" All the career books that I was reading, they all said that where your passion meets your talent, that's your sweet spot. What is that for you? Again, you didn't know. So I said, "Well, what about teaching? I mean, you taught us, those daily devotions, all the book reports we had to do, taught Sunday school, you were a tutor for a while." This time he kind of leaned back. It's like, could see it kind of sinking in a little bit. And slowly from there, my dad began to climb again. And we celebrated every single step. When he put in his application to be a substitute teacher, we cheered. He did that for so long, he became a para teacher. And eventually he landed a gig as a 6th grade math teacher. one Christmas, the principal came up to me at a party and she said she was so thankful that my dad had decided to join their team. And the classroom that he had gotten had the worst grades of the school. But within 6 months, my dad had taken his students from failing to passing to even exceeding. And up until he retired, my dad still told that same joke about the chicken and the pig. And the kids would still laugh. So it must have been the delivery. And when the laughing would die down, my dad would say, the moral here is you have to be willing to give up everything to get to where you want to be. My dad started from the bottom, and now I'm here. Thank you for listening to my story. All right. So I am fortunate and thankful to bring up our final storyteller, Rodney Lofton, with his story, Run Till I Finish. Thank you, Rodney, for being here, and take it away.
Thank you, Rachel. Good evening, everyone. I'm Rodney, and growing up, I knew that I was a little different from the other boys in my neighborhood. While they were outside playing roly-poly and football, I was sitting underneath my Aunt Jetty in the house watching grade 8 movies and watching shows like The Carol Burnett Show and Sonny and Cher. And I just got lost in this whole entertainment industry. And I said at an early age, that's something that I want to do. And so I started doing local theater all the way through high school and became a member of the All-City Theatrical Company in Richmond. And at that time, I knew that what I thought about when I was a little boy had now kind of manifested in my teenage years. And I knew that I was gay. And I'm a mama's boy. And two of the hardest calls had to come with my mom. So I was watching an episode of Dynasty, which came on Wednesday nights at 9 o'clock. My mom had sent me to live with my dad from Baltimore because I had a failed suicide attempt after struggling with my sexual identity. And my mom wanted me to have a male figure in my life. And although they weren't married, they were the best of friends. And so I went and I stayed with my dad and his wife. And I was empowered and emboldened by this episode of Dynasty where Stephen, the gay son, introduced his partner, his boyfriend at the time, to his father, Blake Carrington. And I decided to call my mother long distance and share with her that I was bisexual. And I believe that would have been the easiest pill to swallow rather than coming out and saying that her only son was gay. And my mom cried. And I never liked hearing my mom cry because it always came across as a sense of disappointment or letting her down. And my mother said through her tears, she said, I always knew. I just didn't want to accept it. And I said to her, and I said, why didn't you tell me? Because it would have made it so much easier to deal with. And she shared with me, she said, you need to talk to your dad this evening. I'm certainly going to give him a call tomorrow, and we're going to talk through this and work through this. So I invited my dad into the den, and I said, I need to talk to you. And we sat there, and I shared with him, I said, Dad, I'm bisexual. And so for the next 20 minutes, my dad looked at me, and I looked at him, and we didn't utter a word. And he finally said, I think you need to go to bed. And so I thought that was my cue to go. So for the next 48 hours, everything seemed fine. I thought, well, I dropped the bomb. No one thinks anything else about it. No one has said anything else about it. So it's pretty good. So my dad's wife didn't want to fix dinner that Friday evening, and so we had to fend for ourselves. And so we went to the local McDonald's, and we were just talking about school and work, and I was sharing stories with him, as I always did. And then suddenly he stopped the car and put it in reverse. And out of left field, he said, you mean to tell me you'd rather spend your time with a bunch of fags than a group of young ladies like that? And he signaled to the bus stop where a couple of young ladies were waiting for the bus. And it kind of caught me off guard. So I just simply said, after regrouping, Dad, I said I was bisexual, not gay. And he said, it's all the same. So my dad and I kind of parted ways at the age of 16 for a little bit because he eventually put me out. And it was difficult for him to actually deal with his youngest child being gay. He was able to graduate school and still eventually pursuing this dream in my head, or in the back of my thoughts now, that I would be in the entertainment industry. And so in 1992, I had the pleasure of meeting the late author, Elin Harris, who wrote this incredible book called Invisible Life. And for someone of my generation, he was the James Baldwin of Black writers, specifically Black gay writers. And had the pleasure of meeting him. And we eventually became friends. And I shared with him during a number of our talks, I want to move to New York. And he said, Rodney, he said, the PR company that's doing my PR, the president is looking for an assistant. And he said, I can put in a good word for you if you'd like. I said, that would be great. And so I planned the interview the end of June in 1992. And the reason for that is because the end of June is always Gay Pride in New York. And I figured I could kill two birds with one stone. I could go to this interview, and if that didn't work out, at least I had a fun-filled weekend at Gay Pride. Well, that Monday, before I left New York to head back to Richmond, Virginia, after the interview, I got a call saying that the job was mine and the official start date and everything. And I really didn't care about salary. I just excited that I had this opportunity. And so I moved to New York in August of 1992, 2 months later. And I was living my dream. It was grunt work, it was paper pushing, but I loved what I was doing because I was part of something that I had envisioned when I was younger. And during my time in New York, I also fell in love. I met someone that I thought, hey, I am now 24 years old. I'm doing what I want to do. I found someone I'm going to spend the rest of my life with, as every young gay man has this version or vision of what love is all about. And in the back of my mind, something that I started at the age of 18, after being in high school, just kind of backtrack a little bit. There was this virus that everyone was talking about. And it was called HTLV3 at the time that I was in high school. I was a junior in high school. And it was this disease that was affecting white gay men. And the only commonalities that we had were that we were both gay. I wasn't white. And the images that I saw on television or the newspaper articles that I read didn't share the stories of people who looked like me, Black people. So I felt it's not going to happen. So fast forward to New York, I always decided to take precautions anyway. I decided to always get tested annually. And I figured that here I am, I met the man of my dreams and I'm going to spend the rest of my life with him. So I might as well go the normal course and go for my physical and get my test results. So in November of 1993, one of the groups that I represented in the entertainment industry was a group called Riff, from the motion picture White Men Can't Jump and Lean on Me. They did the Fair East song. And right before that, I went to be tested. And the young lady who I met, her name was Janine Dees. And she assigned me a piece of paper and I went through the test, the lab work. And she said, the test should be back in a couple of weeks. And I said, that was great. I had a trip coming up to California. And I was really excited because I got an opportunity to get my group Riff to sit in with the posse on the Arsenio Hall show. And my mom videotaped it on VHS tape. And I was able to ask Mr. Hall for an autographed picture for my mom because she was a big fan of his. And so headed back to New York and kind of poo-pooed the idea of getting my test results because I knew that they were negative. And so I got a call from Janine sharing, hey, it's been a couple of weeks. I need you to come in and get your test results. We don't deliver the test results over the telephone. So I pulled myself out of bed and put on a pair of green denim jeans, a Born Americans t-shirt because that was a group that I represented at the time, black baseball cap, black backpack, and I headed out the door. And so I made my way down to 28th and 9th in New York City, 28th Street, 9th Avenue, New York City Health Department, to meet up with Janine Dietz once again. And when I entered her office, we exchanged pleasantries. I shared the trip with her and how excited I was that Christmas was coming up because I was going to present my mom with this autographed photo of her favorite celebrity. And so Janine asked me for the card that she had given me a couple of weeks prior. And she looked at it. And the number that was on the card was 1277597. And this was December 6, 1993, roughly about 2:58 p.m. And so she looked at the card and she turned it back and went to the file cabinet that was right behind her. And she retrieved the file with that card and she looked at the corresponding numbers on the file. And then she handed me the card back and she sat down and she opened the file and she turned it around. And it said, patient has tested HIV antibody positive. And I lost it. I broke down and I started crying. And I was banging my head against the back of the wall. And all the while she's asking me, what are you thinking? What are you feeling? And I said, I'm going to die. I had just turned 25 years old, September 9th, 1993. And while I'm still crying and trying to make heads or tails of this information that she just shared with me, she proceeds to share a lot of information. You need to kill your fruits and vegetables because they contain pesticides that are toxic to your immune system. You need to stop drinking because it's toxic to your immune system. You need to quit smoking because it's toxic to your immune system. And then she handed me a packet of information and sent me on my way. And that long ride from 28th and 9th up to 168 in New York was the longest train ride I ever took. But when I got off the train, I stopped and got a fifth of Bacardi and 2 packs of Newports, and I went to my apartment. And I sat there and I drank myself until I cried. And that was the year that Toni Braxton made her debut. And she had a song called Best Friend. It was cut number 11 on her debut CD. And there was a line in that song that just played over and over for me. It says, I didn't have the strength to live, but much too young to die. I mentioned earlier about the 2 hardest calls that I had to make. One was telling my mom that her only child was gay. The second was calling my mom ahead of Christmas and telling her that her only son, her only child, was now HIV positive. And there's something about a mother's love. I heard her voice, and through the drunkenness and the tears, I heard her say, what's wrong with you, boy? And I told her, and I said, I tested positive. And I'm sorry I let you down. And to know this woman who hit me about here in height, say to me, we're going to get through this. I want you to go to sleep, and I'm going to call you tomorrow. And that's what I needed that was lacking. I went to sleep. So I can only imagine what she was going through at that moment. But when I arrived in Richmond for the holidays, my mother became my very first HIV/AIDS educator. And we laughed, we cried, and she reassured me that she loved me and that we were in this together. So I returned to New York for a couple months, but realized I needed to be back home because I didn't know how much time I had left. There weren't a lot of treatment options at that time. And so I went back to Richmond, weighing 127 pounds, soaking wet, and prepared myself to die. I refused to cut my hair because I felt like Samson. It was my only source of strength. And a couple of years later, I woke up. I had to go for medical appointments, and I met this incredible gentleman by the name of Bob Higginson, who was my physician assistant, my medical provider. And I guess he sensed, or by my expression, that I had resolved that I was going to die. And he said, "You take care of you. I got this." And so much to the happiness of my mom, I called my best friend, and he came and buzzed me my hair, and I started to live. So I committed myself. I had a wonderful family that supported me, and a great medical provider who told me everything was going to be okay. And so since 1997, I've been doing HIV/AIDS work. In the almost 28 years of living with this disease, I was told I wasn't going to make it, and yet I'm still here. I've accomplished things that I never thought possible. I'm actually married now, as Shug Avery said in The Color Purple. And I have an incredible husband. I have 3 incredible stepchildren. I have 2 grandchildren. Where we are now with HIV disease, it's no longer a gay disease. It's no longer a white gay man's disease. It's a disease of Black and brown folks. And Black and brown folks are disproportionately infected by this disease. And based on what we know about HIV, right now, Friday, July 17th at 6:27 p.m., no one ever has to test positive. We know how it's transmitted, and we know how it's prevented. No one ever has to test positive. But we know that every 9 minutes, someone tests positive for HIV. Now, I can't tell you how this journey is going to end for me. God willing, I will see 52 years old come September 9th this year. But I think the words of Smokey Norfolk, the gospel singer, says it perfectly. I'll run this race nestled safely in amazing grace. I made up my mind. I don't have much time, but I'm going to run till I finish. Thank you.
And we're running with you, Rodney. Thank you so much for sharing your story.
Thank you.
The phrase "now more than ever" is thrown around quite a bit these days, but now more than ever, your story is incredibly important and incredibly timely.
Thank you.
Thank you for honoring me and this space with your story. So tonight you heard stories of resilience from a mother raising her young daughter. You heard from a man who overcame homelessness and conquered the Marines and now is giving back to his community. And you heard from a woman who took some lessons from her father and continues to climb. And you heard from our final storyteller and how diagnosis became his life's mission. These are stories of resilience and struggles, but these are stories by people who happen to be Black. And until Black Lives Matter, we will continue to be telling our stories to be whole. If you want to support our efforts, follow us on social media at The Whole Story Show on Instagram and Facebook. Also subscribe to our newsletter on our website at thewholestoryshow.com. And with that, let's bring up our storytellers for a final bow. Rodney, Jason, Chrystal, why don't you all join me on stage? Hello, guys. I hope you're feeling great and feeling proud. I know the crowd is clapping. I know you're getting a standing ovation. I'm clapping for you. Thank you all for being here. I've got some comments. So beautiful. Thank you, each of you, for sharing your stories. Thank you, Onita, for sharing. Samantha, incredible. Thank you for your vulnerability and work towards advocacy. And any more? There are a lot of comments. Chrystal, thank you for sharing your vulnerable story. I'm sure that's for you, Rodney. To each of you, I'm blown away. I'm so honored and so thankful that you're here. Let's do a final bow. Yes, you're welcome. 1, 2, 3, let's bow. 1, 2, 3. Let's do it again because everyone's clapping and cheering. I know they are. I can hear it in my spirit. 1, 2, 3. Thank you all. Thanks for being here for the whole story. Have a good night.